The cabin windows rattled against their frames as thunder boomed overhead. Rain lashed against the wooden walls with such fury it sounded like thousands of fingernails scratching to get in. Inside, the soft glow of an oil lamp cast long shadows across the room, illuminating three figures locked in a moment that would forever alter their lives. Glass shattered. A woman screamed. The dull thud of body against wood echoed through the small space. But let's rewind to just moments earlier. Clara's fingers traced slow circles on Adrian's chest as they lay intertwined on the worn couch. The pregnancy test had confirmed what she already knew. She was carrying Daniel's child. Yet here she was, miles from her husband, wrapped in another man's arms. The cabin creaked and moaned around them, nature's soundtrack to their forbidden reunion. "He doesn't understand me like you do," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm. "With Daniel, I'm suffocating. With you, I can breathe again." Adrian's lips found hers just as headlights swept across the cabin wall. Clara froze. No one knew they were here. No one except. The door crashed open with such force the hinges nearly tore from the frame. There stood Daniel, rain-soaked and trembling, his eyes wild as lightning flashed behind him. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. The tableau held husband, wife, lover, each processing the nightmare unfolding in real time. "Clara?" Daniel's voice cracked, disbelief giving way to rage as his gaze darted between his pregnant wife and her former flame. His hand tightened around something metal, the old fireplace poker he'd grabbed from beside the door. "Have you ever wondered how far someone would go when they discover the ultimate betrayal? What darkness lurks within even the most controlled, loving person when they're pushed beyond their breaking point?" Before I reveal what happened in that cabin on that fateful night, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and join our True Crime Village community. Because some stories aren't just about crime. They're about the fragile threads of trust that bind us together, and what happens when those threads violently snap. 7 years before the storm at the cabin, Clara stood radiant in a lace gown, her eyes fixed on Daniel as they exchanged vows beneath a canopy of cherry blossoms. Their wedding photos captured it perfectly. The way he looked at her like she held every answer to every question he'd ever asked. The beginning blazed with passion and possibility. "We'll travel the world," Daniel had promised, tracing constellations on her bare shoulder after they'd made love in their first apartment. "We'll build a life so extraordinary people will envy our happiness." For 3 years, they nearly did. Weekends meant spontaneous road trips or cooking elaborate meals together in their tiny kitchen. They collected memories like others collected possessions. Summer nights dancing barefoot in rooftop gardens, winter mornings building snowmen outside their bedroom window. The shift came gradually, like clouds gathering before a downpour. Daniel's promotion brought financial security but demanded rigid schedules. The spontaneous man who once whisked Clara away for midnight picnics transformed into someone who needed control, predictability, order. His love remained intense but took on a possessive edge. "I called you 3 times, he'd say, checking her phone while she slept. "Where were you that you couldn't answer?" The pregnancy, unplanned but not unwelcome, accelerated his transformation. Daniel cataloged every food in their refrigerator, monitoring Clara's intake with scientific precision. He installed tracking apps for her safety, scheduled her doctor appointments without consulting her, replaced her evening walks with prenatal yoga sessions he'd personally vetted. "I'm just protecting what matters most," he'd insist when she protested, one hand on her growing belly. His touch, once electric, now felt like handcuffs. At night, Clara would stand by their bedroom window watching lightning flash across distant hills, her reflection ghostly against the glass. The thunder spoke what she couldn't, a rumbling dissent against the prison her marriage had become. Their home, tasteful, immaculate, suffocating, became her elegant cage. Friends stopped calling after Daniel questioned their influences. Family visits decreased when he hovered during every conversation. "You don't need them," he'd whisper. "We have each other. We have our baby." But in truth, Clara had neither. The husband she adored had vanished, replaced by a warden who measured his love in restrictions. The child within her felt less like a blessing and more like the final lock on a door that couldn't be opened. As weeks turned to months, Clara's smile became practiced, her obedience automatic. Yet behind her eyes, rebellion kindled, a dangerous flame that only needed the right breeze to ignite into an inferno that would consume everything. It was an ordinary Tuesday when Clara's carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. 6 months pregnant and desperate for an hour of freedom, she had convinced Daniel she needed specific pregnancy books only available at Thornfield Books, the aging independent store downtown. The scent of aging paper and fresh coffee enveloped her as she stepped inside, breathing deeply for what felt like the first time in months. Between tall oak shelves in the memoir section, a laugh cut through the quiet, warm, familiar, impossible. Clara rounded the corner and there stood Adrian Reynolds, thumbing through a travel guide to South America, looking exactly as he had 5 years ago when she told him goodbye. Clara? His voice wrapped around her name like a caress. Their history flashed between them in the silence that followed late-night philosophy debates during college. The summer they'd spent tracing coastlines in his beaten-up Jeep, the breathless intensity of loving someone who challenged everything she thought she knew about herself. "I heard you married," Adrian said finally, his eyes dropping to her rounded belly before returning to her face. "I did." Her wedding ring felt suddenly heavy. "You never left town?" "Left and came back. Teaching literature at Westridge now." He smiled. "Some journeys circle back to where they started." One coffee became two. 2 hours evaporated like morning mist. Daniel called twice. Clara kept their conversation brief, manufacturing excuses about long checkout lines. "You've changed," Adrian observed after she hung up. Not an accusation, a concerned observation from someone who once knew every expression that crossed her face. "Have I?" The question broke something inside her. Tears came without warning. There in the bookstore cafe, Adrian simply listened as Clara described her beautiful prison. The hushed arguments, the constant surveillance, the crushing weight of Daniel's protection. Words she'd never voiced tumbled forth, her whispers growing more urgent with each confession. "I remember a woman who climbed water towers at midnight to see meteor showers," Adrian said gently. "A woman who wanted to write novels and travel to places without names on maps." "She's still here," Clara whispered, one hand pressed against her heart. "Somewhere." Their meetings became regular, stolen hours justified as prenatal classes or doctor appointments. Each encounter reminded Clara of sensations long forgotten. Laughter that came easily, conversations that wandered without purpose, the exhilaration of being truly seen. When Adrian mentioned the cabin his uncle owned, remote, peaceful, a writer's retreat 2 hours north, Clara felt an electric current race beneath her skin. "Just for an afternoon," he suggested. "No pressure, no expectations. Just somewhere you can breathe without anyone watching how you do it." The invitation hovered between them, charged with unspoken potential. 1 afternoon away from surveillance cameras and tracking apps. Hours of freedom that Daniel would never know about. "I couldn't possibly," she said aloud, while everything inside her screamed the opposite. Adrian simply held her gaze. "The person you used to be would have already grabbed her keys. What would you do if you found yourself trapped between duty and desire? If the life you promised to honor had become a beautiful nightmare, while a forbidden path offered the oxygen you desperately needed? Would you stay safely within boundaries that were slowly suffocating you, or risk everything for a taste of what once made your heart race?" For Clara, that answer came after another week of Daniel's suffocating routine. She texted Adrian a single word that would ultimately change 3 lives forever. "When?" The narrow dirt road wound through dense forest for nearly a mile before revealing the cabin. A weathered structure nestled among towering pines. No neighbors in sight, no passing traffic, just wilderness stretching in every direction. The perfect hiding place for a woman who felt hunted in her own home. "It's been in my family for generations," Adrian explained, unlocking the simple wooden door. "No internet, spotty cell service. The world can't find you here unless you want to be found." Clara stepped inside, brushing her fingers across rough-hewn walls. The cabin was modest. One main room with a stone fireplace, small kitchen, and a bedroom visible through an arched doorway. Nothing fancy, nothing pretentious. Just honest wood and stone that had weathered decades of storms. "It's perfect," she whispered. They moved like cautious dancers at first, hyper-aware of boundaries that had once been crossed without hesitation. Adrian lit the fireplace while Clara explored, discovering worn books stacked on windowsills and vintage records beside an ancient player. The afternoon light filtered through dust-speckled air, turning ordinary moments golden. Over tea in mismatched mugs, conversation flowed like a river finding its natural course. Not just about their past, but the years between, his failed engagement, her successful career abandoned for Daniel's comfort, dreams deferred by both. "I never stopped thinking about you," Adrian admitted, his voice low. "Even when I tried." Clara's hands trembled as she set down her mug. "I convinced myself I'd imagined what we had, that nothing could really burn that bright." His fingers found hers across the table. "And now?" Hours dissolved. The line between reminiscing and reconnecting blurred with each passing moment. When Adrian tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, Clara closed her eyes, leaning into his touch like a plant starved for sunlight. "Tell me what you want," he whispered against her temple. "To remember who I was before I forgot." Their lips met with the familiarity of returning to a beloved homeland after years in exile. Not the frantic passion of new lovers, but the profound recognition of souls that had never truly separated. Meanwhile, 50 miles away, Daniel paced their immaculate living room, Clara's prenatal appointment schedule in his hand. 3 calls to her doctor had confirmed his growing suspicions. There was no extended 4-hour consult scheduled today. The tracking app on her phone showed her location at the clinic, but something felt wrong. He scrolled through her recent texts, nothing unusual. Checked their shared accounts, no unexpected purchases. But when he opened her laptop, the browser history revealed a single search: how to disable location tracking without detection. Daniel's methodical mind began cataloging irregularities from recent weeks. Unexplained absences, vague excuses, the distant look in her eyes when she thought he wasn't watching. The evidence mounted like storm clouds gathering force. If you're finding this story as compelling as I do, take a second to hit that like button. The choices we make in our most desperate moments often reveal truths we've hidden even from ourselves. Daniel's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel as his SUV carved through sheets of driving rain. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour, each flash of lightning momentarily illuminating the rugged forest road ahead. The dashboard clock read 7:42 p.m., 3 hours since he'd made the discovery that had shattered his world. It had been Clara's old credit card, the one she thought was closed, that betrayed her. A single forgotten receipt in her jacket pocket for gas at a station 2 hours north, dated on a day she claimed to be at her mother's. One thread pulled, and her entire deception unraveled. A quick call to her mother confirmed she hadn't visited in weeks. The phone's location data he'd trusted proved falsified. Clara had left her phone at a shopping mall while using a burner he never knew existed. Finally, a search of her email revealed communications with a rental agency about access codes to a family cabin. Adrian's family cabin. Daniel had known about Adrian, the college boyfriend, the one that got away. Clara occasionally mentioned him with practiced casualness that never quite masked the lingering attachment. But Daniel had dismissed him as a ghost from the past, not a present threat. "She's carrying my child," Daniel whispered to the empty car, his voice raw with disbelief. Rain pounded harder as the trees thickened, the narrow road deteriorating with each mile. Each bump in the road stoked his fury. Each crack of thunder mirrored the fracturing of his trust. The man who had built his life around order and control now drove through chaos, consumed by emotions he couldn't categorize. Betrayal, yes. Rage, certainly. But beneath those burned something more complex. A devastating fear that his love had always been insufficient, that his devotion had driven away what he most wanted to protect. The GPS announced arrival as lightning split the sky, illuminating a small cabin nestled among ancient pines. Through a rain-streaked window, he saw them, Two silhouettes pressed close on a worn sofa, faces illuminated by firelight. Daniel sat motionless, rain drumming on the car roof. For one suspended moment, he considered driving away, pretending he hadn't seen, preserving what remained of their life together. Then Clara laughed, that uninhibited sound he hadn't heard in years, and something primal awakened inside him. The distance from car to cabin door passed in a blur. Rain plastered his clothes to his skin, cold drops mixing with hot tears he didn't realize were falling. No knocking, no warning. His shoulder met solid wood with the force of accumulated betrayal. The door crashed open. Time crystallized into perfect, awful clarity. Clara sat partially clothed, her pregnant belly evident even in the dim light, Adrian's arm protectively around her shoulders. Her smile died instantly, replaced by naked horror as she registered Daniel's presence. Daniel! His name fell from her lips like a foreign word. Adrian stood first, instinctively positioning himself between them. This isn't what I think? Daniel's voice emerged unnaturally calm, a stark contrast to the storm both outside and within him. My pregnant wife half-naked with her ex-lover in a hidden cabin isn't exactly open to interpretation. Clara rose awkwardly, one hand covering her mouth, the other protectively cradling her belly. Please, let me explain. Explain. Water dripped from Daniel's clothes onto the wooden floor, forming a growing puddle around his feet. You're carrying our child while betraying everything we built. Adrian stepped forward. Man, you need to calm down. Nobody meant for this to happen. Daniel noticed the fireplace poker then, mounted beside the hearth. Heavy, iron within easy reach. His fingers flexed involuntarily. Daniel, please. Clara's voice trembled. We can talk about this. We can figure this out. Figure this out? Daniel laughed, a hollow sound that didn't belong to him. He moved toward the fireplace, his movements deliberate. I already have. What happens next will change 3 lives forever. Step away from my wife. Daniel's voice cut through the cabin like ice, each word precise despite the storm raging inside him. Adrian raised his hands, palms forward. Let's all take a breath here. Nobody wants this situation to get worse. Worse. Daniel's laugh held no humor. My pregnant wife sneaking off to sleep with her ex-boyfriend seems pretty rock bottom to me. Clara moved toward him, her face pale. Daniel, please listen. This isn't about you. That much is obvious. His eyes never left Adrian. How long has this been happening? The whole pregnancy? Is the baby even mine? Of course it's yours. Clara's voice cracked. This was the first time we... Don't lie to me. Daniel slammed his fist against the wall, sending a framed photo crashing to the floor. The glass shattered, the sound startling all 3 of them into momentary silence. Adrian stepped forward. You're upset, and you have every right to be. But Clara needs to stay calm for the baby. Let's talk this through like adults. Like adults. Daniel's voice dropped dangerously low. Adults don't sneak around behind their partner's back. Adults don't betray the people who love them. Clara moved between them, hands outstretched. Daniel, we can go home. We can get counseling. I made a terrible mistake, but please, a mistake is forgetting an anniversary. Daniel's eyes glistened with unshed tears. This was a choice. Every secret text, every lie about where you were going, every moment in his arms. All choices. Adrian placed a protective hand on Clara's shoulder. She's not going anywhere with you tonight. Not like this. The touch ignited something primal in Daniel. He lunged forward, shoving Adrian backward with unexpected force. Adrian stumbled, regained his balance, then charged forward. The 2 men collided in a tangle of limbs and fury, crashing into the coffee table, which splintered beneath their weight. Stop it! Both of you! Clara screamed, trying to pull them apart, but they were beyond hearing. Daniel landed a solid punch to Adrian's jaw. Adrian responded by driving his knee into Daniel's stomach. They rolled across the floor, knocking over lamps, upending chairs, each fueled by a different kind of desperation. Clara grabbed a vase of water, dumping it over them in a failed attempt to separate them. "Think of the baby, please." For a moment, they paused, both men breathing heavily. Daniel's lip was split, blood trickling down his chin. Adrian's eye was already swelling shut. "Get out," Adrian gasped. "Get out now, cool off. Talk to her tomorrow." Daniel rose slowly, seeming to consider the words. Clara reached for him, relief washing over her face, until she saw his hand close around the iron fireplace poker. "Daniel, no," she whispered. "You took everything from me," Daniel said, his voice eerily calm as he raised the poker. Adrian scrambled backward. "Put that down, man. This isn't you. You don't know me." Daniel advanced. "No one does, apparently." Clara threw herself between them, arms wrapped protectively around her belly. "Daniel, I'm begging you." The next moments unfolded in horrifying slow motion. Daniel tried to push Clara aside. Adrian lunged to protect her. The poker arced through the air with terrible purpose. A sickening crack echoed through the cabin as metal connected with skull. Adrian crumpled to the floor, blood pooling beneath his head with alarming speed. Clara's scream seemed to come from somewhere outside herself. Primal, agonized, disbelieving. Daniel stood frozen, the bloody poker still clutched in his hand, his face a mask of shock as he stared at what he'd done. In an instant, 3 lives that had been entangled in love and betrayal were now bound together by something far more permanent, an act that could never be undone. The poker slipped from Daniel's fingers, clattering against the wooden floor like a final punctuation mark. Time seemed suspended as blood spread in a dark halo around Adrian's head, his body unnaturally still. No one moved. No one breathed. The only sound was the relentless drumming of rain against the cabin roof. Clara broke first, dropping to her knees beside Adrian. Her hands hovered over him, trembling violently, afraid to touch yet desperate to help. "What have you done?" she whispered, voice barely audible. Then louder, "What have you done?" Daniel stared at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. "I didn't mean to," he moved. "You were—" The words fragmented as reality crashed through his shock. Clara's scream pierced the night, raw, guttural, primal. She pressed her palms against Adrian's wound, blood seeping between her fingers, as she begged him to open his eyes. Her pregnant belly pressed against his side as she leaned over him, tears mingling with blood. Lights flashed through the cabin windows, blue and red cutting through the darkness. A neighbor from a distant property had heard the screams and called 911. Officers arrived with guns drawn, confronting a scene straight from a nightmare. A blood-soaked floor, a motionless body, a sobbing pregnant woman, and a shell-shocked man standing immobile in the center of destruction. "Put your hands where I can see them." The command sliced through the cabin. Daniel complied mechanically while paramedics rushed to Adrian's side, quickly confirming what Clara's wails had already revealed. Adrian Reynolds, 32, was pronounced dead at the scene. Clara collapsed as they pulled her away from the body, her cries transforming into hyperventilating gasps. A female officer wrapped a blanket around her shoulders while paramedics checked her vital signs, concerned about the pregnancy under such extreme stress. Daniel watched silently as officers cuffed his hands behind his back, reading him his rights against the backdrop of medical jargon and radio static. His eyes never left Clara, who couldn't bear to look in his direction. "I loved you," he murmured as they led him away. "Everything I did was for us." News traveled faster than the storm clouds. By morning, the peaceful lakeside community was transformed. Neighbors who had exchanged pleasantries at mailboxes now huddled in shocked conversations. News vans lined the main road. Social media exploded with partial information and wild speculation. Clara's sister arrived at the hospital where Clara had been taken for observation. Daniel's parents sat stunned in the police station waiting room. Adrian's mother collapsed upon notification and was hospitalized herself. 3 families shattered. One moment of uncontrolled rage. A baby who would enter the world carrying the weight of a tragedy it had witnessed from within the womb. If you're wondering what happened to Clara and her unborn child after this devastating night, comment below with your thoughts. Did she keep the baby? Did Daniel ever meet his child? The answers might surprise you. The county courthouse steps became a battleground of flashing cameras and shouted questions as Daniel's trial began 4 months after that fatal night. Inside, the wood-paneled courtroom fell silent as Clara took the stand, her baby born just weeks earlier. He wasn't himself when he picked up that poker, she testified, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. The man I married disappeared that night. So did the life we planned. The prosecution built their case methodically, premeditation evidenced by Daniel tracking Clara to the cabin, the violence of the attack, the deliberate choice to grab a weapon. Photos of the blood-spattered cabin walls made jurors wince. Adrian's final text message to his mother, helping a friend through a tough time, home tomorrow, added poignant weight to what was lost. Daniel's defense team argued temporary insanity, presenting a man driven to momentary madness by profound betrayal. Character witnesses described his previous gentle nature, his excitement about becoming a father, his dedication to Clara. Psychiatric evaluations suggested a catastrophic emotional break rather than calculated murder. I never intended to hurt anyone, Daniel testified, his once confident frame now diminished in an orange jumpsuit. I just wanted to save my marriage, my family. Then everything went black. The jury deliberated for 36 hours before returning their verdict. Guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced Daniel to 20 years with possibility of parole after 15, a punishment that satisfied neither family. As bailiffs led Daniel away, he caught one final glimpse of Clara cradling their infant daughter in the back row. They locked eyes briefly before she turned away, shielding the baby from the sight of her father in chains. Outside the courthouse, Adrian's mother addressed reporters with quiet dignity. No sentence brings my son back. No punishment repairs what's broken. We're all serving life sentences now. Clara disappeared from public view after the trial, moving across the country to raise her daughter away from the whispers and judgment. The press eventually lost interest, but 3 families continued living the aftermath. 1 burial, 1 imprisonment, 1 child who would someday ask questions about her father and why he wasn't there to see her grow. Every tragedy reveals uncomfortable truths about human nature. This blood-soaked cabin tale isn't simply about a murder. It's about the invisible threads that bind relationships together, and what happens when those threads are severed one by one. Daniel's love transformed from protection to possession, a common metamorphosis that often goes unnoticed until boundaries disappear completely. His need for control masked deep insecurity, creating the prison Clara so desperately needed to escape. Yet his actions, however suffocating, don't justify Clara's response. When Clara sought comfort in Adrian's arms, she chose temporary relief over difficult conversations. The secret meetings, the hidden communications, each represented a brick removed from the foundation of her marriage, weakening the structure until collapse became inevitable. Adrian, despite his genuine feelings, entered a volatile situation with romantic notions instead of clear-eyed responsibility. His willingness to participate in deception contributed to the perfect storm that claimed his life. The violence erupted in seconds but was built over months of small decisions. A tracking app installed, a text message deleted, a dinner conversation avoided. No single moment created this tragedy. Rather, it was the accumulation of choices made by 3 people who each believed they were justified in their actions. The aftermath extends far beyond that isolated cabin. Adrian's mother lost her only son. Daniel's parents visit a prison instead of their grandchild. Clara's daughter will one day face impossible questions about her father's absence and her mother's choices. Entire communities were left to process how well they truly knew their neighbors. This story reminds us how quickly passion can turn to violence. If you found this valuable, please subscribe to True Crime Village for more stories with powerful life lessons that might just save your relationships or even your life.